And we have the power of a living God living on the inside of us. And this should be our declaration. If you really understood the power in that phrase, I believe it would change a lot of how we view and how we see the things that are happening in our life. It would definitely change our perspective. So, welcome back to Sisterhood Check-In. I am your author and coach, Nadira Lewis, and I'm excited because I can't wait to share with you. This is something lately I've been really like just pondering on some things, and God has been really speaking to me. I've been looking at a lot of things and seeing a lot of things and really just I don't know, it's just something I had just been meditating on, and I just wanted to kind of take this time to kind of share with you all some of the things that I feel like God was showing me when it comes to our trial. So I'm going to go ahead and put up today's topic. So this topic for today is your trials, right? Let me correct that because that's not correct. Your trials is supposed to be your trials have been orchestrated. So I'm going to go ahead and change that real quick. Your trials have been orchestrated. And what do I mean that they've been orchestrated? Okay. Well, the scripture says the trying of your faith works patience, right? So some of the things that we go through in life, we have to remind ourselves that some of the things that we go through is because it is there to try our faith, right? How can God be certain that he can trust us, right? With the journey and the destination and the purpose that he's given us, right? By trying us, right? Your faith must stand trial, right? And the reason why I wanted to talk about this subject is because I noticed that we're living in a time where a lot of believers are departing from the faith, right? And departing from the faith meaning they're walking away, they're turning their back on and I wouldn't say that all of them are turning their back on God, because some people are just turning their back on what they perceived as God, right? What they thought was God, right? And so one of the things I'm realizing is that when you get to a point where things are starting to go differently than what you've expected them to, I want us to kind of take a look by using an example that I've read in the Bible in regards to Job. And the reason why Job was so relevant to me is because as I was meditating on some of the things that I was seeing, and I was just like, wow, God, so many people are really getting discouraged, and it's in the trials that some people are literally walking away from God, right? Some people are walking away from what they know as God because they have not cultivated a relationship with God to understand that his ways are not our ways, and neither is his thoughts our thoughts. And so what happens is when things happen in our lives, the Bible tells us to not think it strange concerning the fiery trials that are there to try us, as though something strange has happened to us. And so because we live in a world where modern day Christianity is so blatantly different than it was back then, is because now we live in a world where everything is have it our way. You can go to a restaurant, everything is done your way. You don't have to wait for anything. We live in a world full of technology where you don't have to literally wait for anything. And it's impacted even our faith and what I mean by it's impacted our faith is because we no longer no longer stand on scripture when it says wait, when the Bible says wait on the Lord and be of good courage. Wait, I say, on the Lord, right? We don't know how to wait on the Lord because it's hard to wait on God when you live in a society where everything goes the way you want it to go, right? And you don't have to wait on anything. So to actually have to tell somebody to wait, it's almost like impossible, right? It's almost impossible for them to do, because why do I have to wait? I don't have to wait on anything else I want in the world. And now you're telling me I have to wait on God? Where they do that at, right? Now, when you hear stuff like the just shall live by faith, right? We only tend to use that in only certain circumstances, and we don't have a real revelation or complete understanding of what that actually means to wait, to actually live by faith, right? To live by the convictions, to live with the integrity of knowing that God is going to be there for you regardless. It is one of his promise. He said he's going to be with us even to the end of the world, right? But what's happening is our inability to comprehend what God is doing in our life gets us discouraged. How do I know that? Because the Bible says the Lord speaks once, yea, twice, and man perceiveth it not. So there are some things that God may be speaking to you that you have yet to perceive, right? Because you have not cultivated a relationship with him. If his sheep knows his voice, right? And a stranger they won't follow. When you don't cultivate your relationship with God, then you will tend to follow, your response will follow the same response as everybody else response when they're going through different things. So let's get into it. I want to kind of bring this up. We're going to read, or if you have your Bibles, and for those of you that are watching me for the first time, thank you so much. I'm Nadira. I'm an author and mindset coach, and I help women with wisdom in the areas of identity, right? And self-care, right? And the way I do that is I help them to dominate over opposing thoughts that interfere or affect their mindset, right? So if this is your first time watching me on Sisterhood Check-In, I am here to help you. If you struggle in the areas of your mind, whether you're a believer or a non-believer, you are in the right place. And I am going to help you in the areas of your mindset concerning your life. And the way we do that, right? The way we change our mindset in regards to the thoughts that are in our life, we have to think about and examine what we are meditating on. We have to look at how we are developing our perspective. Your perspective is what helps you, right? Or what helps form your basis for in which you see things, right? So, and your basis in how you see things and your perspective that's formed that causes the basis for how you see things has a lot to do with your experiences and your knowledge, right? So we're going to read in Job, right? In Job, I'm going to pull up and we're going to go through Job real quick. And the reason why I wanted to choose Job, because Job's example and how he lived was very it's a perfect example towards the subject that I'm talking about today. Because Job, when he was going through things, and first of all, he didn't know, right, that God was having a conversation with Satan in regards to what was getting ready to happen in his life. He had no idea, right? He had no idea that God was having a conversation with Satan and asking him and making him and asking him to give an account of what he was doing. And he began to talk about how he was going to and fro. And God offered Satan and asked him, have you considered, because God knows the mind, he knows everybody's thoughts, intentions. He knows that Satan was looking, because the scripture says he's always roaming the earth, looking and seeing and seeking whom he may devour. So in this particular case, God asks him, have you considered my servant Job? And so we're going to go through, I'm not going to just go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and read it, right? So we can get a better understanding of it. And so in Job chapter 1 says, there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright and one who feared God and abstained and turned away from evil because he honored God. And I'm reading the Amplified version of Job 1. 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. He also possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke pairs of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very great number of servants, so that this man was the greatest and the wealthiest and most respected of all the men of the east, which is northern Arabia, right? So here in the first couple of verses, it's starting out and letting us know what type of person Job was, right? And I think that's great for setting the foundation to let us know what type of person he is, so that we won't look at it as, oh, he was a specific type of person. We don't have any room to pick apart, right? The type of person who was getting ready to face the things that he was getting ready to face. So it says his sons used to go in and feast in the house of each one of his day, and they would send word and invite their three sisters to eat and drink with them. So the siblings were close, right? Everybody was close. They would come together. This was a normal thing for them to do, to get together and feast together, right? And eat and drink together, just like most of us families do on Sundays. On Sundays, some people that have their families around them, what happens? You have Sunday dinners and you invite people over, whether it's your spiritual family or whether it's your natural family, and you eat and drink and you have fun, right? And you enjoy your Sunday. Well, this is kind of sort of like the same situation with Job. Job was in a situation where his children were together as they normally would, right? And it says, when the days of their feasting were over, Job would send for them and consecrate them, rising early in the morning and offering burnt offerings according to the number of all of them. For Job said, "It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts," right? Job did this all the time. So Job was giving offerings on the behalf of his kids, because of the fact that in case his kids sinned, in case they did anything that displeased God, this is why he will offer offerings for each of his kids. Same day principle. When our kids get into different things, how many of us who are praying parents, we constantly are consecrating our children before God? We're constantly praying that God covers and protects them. We're constantly fasting and making sure that we are covering our children in prayer, because we don't know what could possibly happen to them, right? Now, here in verse 6, it says, "There was a day when the sons of God, which were the angels, right, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan, right, came among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, From where have you come?" Where you been, bro? What you been doing? Not that he didn't know, but he wanted him to give an account. Where you been, bro? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming around on the earth and from walking around on it." The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered and reflected on my servant Job? For there is none like him on the earth." Now, how many of y'all would love to have God bragging about how awesome you are, how faithful you are, right? He's letting Satan know that he is all the people that you're trying to kill and steal and destroy. Have you considered Job? There's nobody on the earth like him, right? He's blameless and upright. And not only that, he fears me, right? He fears and reverences the Lord and abstains and turns away from evil because he honors God, right? How many of you can be known? How many of you people can look at you and say, "Man, they honor God"? I can tell by their walk with God, from what I see, how they live their lives, that they really honor God. Like, wow, their fruit is a determining factor to help me understand that, wow, these people, they know God. Like, they actually have, this is an honorable person, right? And then it says, and then Satan says, answered the Lord and says, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge of protection around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands and conferred prosperity and happiness upon him," right? "And his possessions have increased in the land." So here Satan is saying, look, you got your hand of protection around him. He's covered. You have blessed him both financially and spiritually, right? Of course he's serving you, right? This is Satan's perception of how he sees us. As long as God's hands is on us, as long as things are going the way yeah, of course you serve God. This is what Satan is saying. They're serving you because everything is going right, right? But he says, "But put forth your hand now and touch and destroy all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." So here Satan is telling him the reason why Job is serving you, the reason why Job is in you the way he is because you have blessed him, right? You have pretty much prospered him. You've blessed him. You've given him everything his heart's desire. Of course he's going to serve you. Of course he's going to honor you, right? He said, but if you take all of that away, he's going to curse you to your face. Now, here God is looking at the fact that he's listening to him tell him, because Satan is the accuser of the brethren, right? He's coming to God and saying, yeah, the reason why so and so is serving you is because everything's going well with them, but take the things that you consider to be take all the things that they consider to be deemed important to them, and watch they curse you to your face. Take the things from them that they have been holding on all their life, and see if their response will still be the same, right? And so the Lord answers to Satan, behold, all that Job has is in your power. Only do not put your hand on the man himself. And so Satan departed from the presence of the Lord. So here it is. God is hosting a conversation, right, with Satan in heaven, right, and telling him, you can hear Satan is telling him, oh yes, Job is only serving you because everything is going right in his life. Of course he's going to serve you, but if you take everything away, he's going to curse you to his face. So God is giving Satan the opportunity to attack Job and to touch everything that's surrounding him except him himself, right? Now, Job is unaware of this conversation. Job is living his best life on earth and has no idea that his trial that he's getting ready to have has been orchestrated. So God, from what I'm seeing in what I'm reading, has a habit of orchestrating the things that we're going through. That's why he told us, don't think it's strange concerning the things that are there to try us, as though some strange thing has happened to us, because he wants us to understand he is in control. So if he allows it, then that means he's orchestrated your victory as well, right? So he says, so he goes on to say, now, and then all of a sudden, now we start to talk about, now it goes into to Job. We get back into Job. So now in the first part, you have a conversation where the Satan is telling God that Job is only serving him because everything is going well with him, right? So now there was a day when Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And the scripture tells you, we read earlier, this was something that they did commonly. This wasn't something, this is what they did. They ate and drank over each other's house, like what we would do. And the messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were feeding beside them. And the Sabians, right, which is the Arabics, the Arabians, right, attacked and swooped down on them and took away their animals. So here it is. They had an attack, of not a spiritual attack, a physical attack, right? That was orchestrated by something spiritual, right? So here it is. They had an attack he had an attack in the areas of his stuff, right? His donkey, it says, and the Sabians attacked and swooped down on them, took away their animals, right? Took away their livestock. And they also killed the servants with the edge of the sword. So not only did he kill his livestock, he killed the servants that were there too. And it says, and I am alone and escaped to tell you, right? Isn't there something how he allowed one person to escape to make sure Job got the message that, your stuff is destroyed, right? As if that wasn't enough, right? And then it says, while he was speaking, while the man was yet speaking, here comes, it says, another messenger came and said, fire of God, lightning has fallen from heaven and burnt up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he's speaking now, that's two people already done came to him and said, look, your oxen is gone. They took away the Sabians came and took your animals. Your servants are gone. Not only that, now he's telling him that, that fire done came, burnt up your sheep and your servants and consumed them. And and I'm the only one that hear this escape to be able to tell you that, right? And then it says and then while he was speaking, it says another messenger came and said the Chaldeans formed 3 bands and made a raid on the camels and have taken away and have killed the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped. Then here it is now, a fifth person comes while he was yet, talk about overwhelmed, right? He didn't come in. He came in like a flood, right? He came in, right? And he says, while he was still speaking, another person came and said, your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking. Now, I know Job probably at this point, his heart is probably pounding like, what? Right? He says, and your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And suddenly, a great wind came from across the desert and struck the four corners of the house, and it fell on the young people and they died. And I alone am here to escape to tell you, right? So here it is. You got five people coming to him back to back saying, yo, not only is your livestock destroyed, but your children, your house has literally fell to the ground, and all of your children have passed away. All of your children. To I just even hearing that, some of us, when we have one thing happen to us, we tend to crush under pressure. But here's an example of a man who has cultivated his relationship with God, right? And cultivated his relationship and knew that, wait a minute, not saying that it avoided him feeling the sense of sorrow and not feeling some sort of fear, like, wow, it meant that this is what helped you to understand the mindset and the level of faith that Job had to prove to you he had cultivated his relationship with God. Because this is how Job responded in verse 20. It says, then Job got up and tore his robe, which is a sign of grieving, right? He shaved his head and in mourning for his children, right? And so he did mourn, right? He did mourn. He did grieve. He did show his humanity, right? By ripping his clothes and mourning for the sake of his children. I don't know anybody that loses a loved one or child and does not feel that knot in your stomach, like, oh my gosh. So Job here is showing that he was mourning for his children. But not only after he mourned, it says he fell to the ground and worshiped God. He fell to the ground and worshiped God. He didn't he didn't curse God. He fell to the ground and worshiped him. That's how we know he had cultivated his relationship with God, because even in his even while he was mourning, he fell on his face and not only yelled at God, he fell on his face and worshiped, which means there was still a part of him that deep down that knew that God is still on the throne, right? Even though he didn't know that Satan and God was having a conversation earlier about what was happening to him, right? So this is Job's response into what happened to him after all of that happened. He said, naked, without possessions, I came into this world from my mother's womb, and naked will I return there. And the Lord, he said, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. How many of you, when you go through things, that you take some time and you look and wonder if this trial that I'm going through is being orchestrated by God? Is God testing me to prove my faithfulness? 9 times out of 10, when we go through things, we go on Facebook, we go on TikTok, and we tell everybody, oh, I'm going through, I'm doing this and this and that. But here, Job said, naked I came into the world, and naked will I return. The Lord gives and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In other words, God, you gave me everything that I have. And if you allowed it to be taken away, then I'm still going to worship you. That you just can't just say that without cultivating a relationship with God, right? You can't just come to that conclusion without first knowing that God is in control. And knowing that is a matter of conviction, being truly convinced in your heart that God is in control. And when I look at some of the situations, some of the things, even when I see people when they're going through things, and all of us suffer, to some degree, it can be extremely painful, right? I know what it's like to lose someone, right? And feel like, and I literally felt like Job felt like, and it's crazy because most of the people that were around me didn't realize that my sorrow was, yes, for my husband. I was missing my husband because he was killed. But at the same time, my heart and my position was towards God because of the relationship that I had with God, right? And I felt like, okay, God, why did this happen, right? You allowed this to happen. And why didn't you not consult with me? Because I had that type of relationship where I would ask God, where God would reveal things to me. I would pray and he would reveal it. So I was concerned. It was alarming because I wanted to know, why didn't you let me know so that I can pray against the horrific accident, vehicular homicide that was getting ready to take place? And it was crazy because I did pray, right? I did pray at exactly the time that he got into an accident. And I did not know until later that God showed me that he did reveal it to me. But because I did not perceive it, right? That I was having before my husband passed away, there was things that God was showing me, things that God was saying and speaking to me that was giving me the sense that something was getting ready to happen. But I didn't think it was going to be with my husband. I thought it was going to be with me. So I was confused. I was like questioning, like, okay, God, why didn't you tell me? Why you didn't this? But I was getting this sense of a shift getting ready to take place. I don't know. And every time that has happened in my life, I can almost pinpoint it to a something that took place major during that time frame. So God was showing me there was getting ready to be a shift, right? The details of that shift I did not know, but I sensed by the Spirit of God that there was getting ready to be something. There's something drastically was getting ready to change. I just did not know what. So here it is. It says that through all of this, Job did not sin, nor did he blame God. In other words, Job did not blame God for what was happening. He didn't say, God, why did you allow this to happen, like some of us would. Job understood that if God gave, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away, right? So in Job chapter 2, it says again, right? So first of all, the first day, and this is happening back to back, right? I can't even imagine. That would have literally, I don't know if I can say that I would have probably been as strong. And then again, you just don't know until you're put in that situation, because sometimes we're a lot stronger than we really think we are, right? So here again in chapter 2, it says, there was a day where the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan, right, also came alongside of them to present himself from the Lord, right? And the Lord says to Satan, from where have you come? And Satan answered the Lord, from roaming around on the earth, walking around on it. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered, now mind you, he's offering up Job again, knowing that Satan is looking for a way to devour, right? So he says, he says, I've been roaming around, excuse me, around the earth and walking around it. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered and reflected on my servant Job? For there is none like him on the earth, blameless and upright man. So again, he's letting him know he's blameless and he's upright. And he says he fears God and abstains and turns away from evil because he honors God, right? And still he remains and holds tightly to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without cause. So God is telling him here, God, he's just like I told you the first time you came to me. I told you that he was an upright man and that he feared me, and that he held tight to his integrity, and it didn't destroy him. Yes, you attacked, you took the most important thing away from him, which was his children and his assets. You messed with his money, You took his house, you took his finances, and you took his children. What is there left? When you lose your house, you lose your children, and you lose your money, what else is there to lose? We're going to talk about that, right? It says, he said, and Satan answered to the Lord, skin for skin. Yea, a man will give all he has for his life. Skin for skin. A man will give all that he has for his life. But put forth your hand and touch his bone and his flesh and severely afflict him, and he will curse you to your face. And so the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand, but you can't touch his life, right? So now here God gives him permission again. So this lets me know two things, right? That everything that we go through in our life is orchestrated, is number one. Number two, that this also lets me know that God, here it is, God is that sometimes that God is not only orchestrating your life. The second thing is that he had confidence, right? That God was going that Job was going to make this through. So he said, go right on ahead. Go right on ahead, because God already knew. He knows the end from the beginning. He already knows how Job is going to come out on the other side of this, right? So that lets me know that he, whom he foreknew, he also predestined, right? He knows who's going to do what, right? He knows if we're going to follow him. He knows if we're going to come through and if the situation or circumstance is going to cause us to walk away from God. He already knows. He's not shocked at our response when we go through things. So this is something I really want you to pay attention to, right? And says, so Satan departed from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome boils and agonizing, painful sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And Job took a piece of broken pottery, which to scrape himself, and he sat down. Oh, that just sounds painful. That just, ugh. And he sat down among the ashes. And then his wife said, now, if anything else could be possibly worse, you attacking my health, right? Now I'm not only that, I'm getting boils and sores. What the heck is going on? And now you got your wife coming to you telling you, right? Do you still cling to your integrity and your faith and trust in God without blaming him? How many people that you've had around you that's saying you still serving God after all this stuff that's happened to you? You around here, you could barely feed your children, you could barely pay your bills, and you still serving God. You ain't got no relationship with God. How many people have said that to you, right? How many of you have experienced people alongside of you looking at you go through things, and the first thing that they can muster up is, and you still serving that God, and you still being faithful, and you still doing this, even though, so you got people who will look at your external situations, right, and will automatically assume that because you're going through something, that it must mean, right, that God is not with you because apparently, if he is who he say he is, then how come we ain't seeing it done in your life, right? So here it is. He says, here Job says to her, you speak as one of the spiritually foolish women speaks, ignorant and oblivious to God's will. So he said to his wife, you speak like a spiritually foolish woman, right? I did a meme a long time ago, and I said, don't be a silly woman, right? That was like the spearhead of my campaign about becoming a woman of Proverbs. Don't be a silly woman. So here he's saying, don't be a spiritually foolish woman that speaks ignorant and oblivious to God's will. Shall we indeed accept only good from God and not also accept adversity and disaster? In other words, are we only going to worship God when things are going well and not look at that maybe that he's allowing these things to happen also? We only going to take the good, but we ain't going to serve him in the bad too. How many of y'all have gone through that, right? But it says, in spite of, Job did not sin with words from his lips. So even though Job may have been questioning what was happening and why it was happening, it did not cause him to to curse God the way his wife suggested, it didn't cause him to walk away from God. It caused him to bow down and worship. And then now, as if that was worse, now Job's three friends heard of his adversity that had come upon him, and each one came from his own place, right? For they had made an appointment together to come to sympathize with him, to comfort him. And when they looked from a distance and did not recognize him because of his disfigurement. Sometimes you ever notice that people, when they go through things, when you are severely depressed and you are severely overcome or have succumbed to your trials, your countenance is different. You look disfigured. You look like you don't look like who you are, how you should look, right? So here it is. He says, when they looked from a distance and did not recognize him because of his disfigurement, they raised their voices and wept, and each one of them tore their robe in grief, and they thrust over their heads towards towards the sky in sorrow. So they sat down on the ground with Job 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his pain was great. In other words, he had his friends that were around him. They saw his grief, that it was so grievous that they couldn't even say a word, right? Because they saw. How many of you have your friends that are around you, and they see when you lose somebody, and the grief, they see the grief on you. Is so much, you can't even say anything because the grief is so much. When my best friend lost her mother, both of her parents, right? It was the most difficult thing to watch her go through that. I literally had no words. And I didn't have any words because I've learned that when you go through things, sometimes the best thing you can do is just be there. Your words will not bring that person back. And sometimes, even though you look at them as words of comfort, it's when you are in that place of loss, it's difficult for you to really embrace what people are saying because you're still trying to comprehend what just happened to you. So when my best friend lost her mother, both of her parents in different seasons, I was lost for words. And I wasn't the type, and I'm not the type of person that just say anything just because it sounds good. Because I know from my own personal loss that words, sometimes the best thing you can do is just be there and allow people to process what they go through. And that's what his friends were doing. They realized, oh my gosh, they were there with him for 7 days and 7 nights and didn't say a word to him. And it's crazy because what do you say to somebody who has lost everything? If you can't relate to what it's like to lose your material possessions, your house, your children, and then lose your health, it's hard for you to communicate any source of encouragement, right? If you haven't been in that place, because you often think, oh my gosh, I don't know the level of pain or grief that they went through. And because I don't know the level of pain or grief that they've gone through, sorry about that. That was my Alexa to remind my mom to take her medicine. So if you have not experienced that level of grief, the first thing you think about is, I don't have words. I don't know what to say to you, right? Because your experience is your experience. It's never, no one will know, even though you may have people who have gone through similar circumstances, it is not the same, right? When you go through something and you have to experience the pain on your own. So though the people around you may sympathize with you, they can't take the pain away. That pain is your own, but they can be there with you, right? So it says, now after Job opened his mouth and then all of a sudden Job starts to curse, and I won't continue to read all of it for the sake of time. So then after Job's friends sit with him, Job begins to vent to his friends, and he begins to curse the day that he was here. He begins to speak. What happens? First he went to worshiping, and now he's trying to keep himself encouraged, but now he's having a human experience, right? And now he's looking at it as, oh my gosh, I cursed the day I was born. And now Job begins to question everything about his existence. Why would curse the day that I was born? He's going through it in verse 3, right? wishing he wasn't even here, right? But notice he didn't curse God. He started cursing himself, right? And then what happens, his friends, after he begins to voice his friends one by one to begins to share with them their perspective on why they think he's going through what he's gone through. And sometimes when people are going through things, the first thing you want to do is you want to encourage them to help bring some sort of perspective to what they're dealing with, right? That's, we all as humans want to help bring some sort of perspective. But the only perspective that really mattered in this situation is God's perspective, right? But his Job friends began to evaluate the things that were happening in the natural realm. He was losing his things. The first thing he thought is, you must be this ain't this ain't happening just because. You must have sinned. You must have failed. And when I look at people who have turned away, or who have professed to turn away from God, most of the time we are quick to put our mouth and say, oh, see, and I started to think about this, and God showed me this, about this is why he said, let the wheat grow with the tares, and he will separate. The reason why he will separate is because God is righteous in pulling and separating the wheat from the tares, right? And sometimes the things that we go through is to help us to understand. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't look at our life and see and say, okay, this is probably a result of this. But in this particular situation, Job is sitting up here going through, he has lost everything that he had. He has no perspective. The only perspective he has is the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. And sometimes there are going to be things that are going to take place in our lives, and we have to come to the conclusion to understand that your trials may have been orchestrated. So you could be looking at a fact that, wait a minute, everything is going just perfectly fine. Now, I'm not talking about those who sin and who do things and you disobey God and you suffer as a result of your disobedience. But I'm talking about there when you are doing everything that you know to do that's right, and you still face trials like somebody who has sinned, and you go through things and you suffer, right, as a result of you walking with God, and it begins to be discouraging, right? You have to you have to look at Job's example. His perspective was, if God allowed this to happen, there has to be, there has to be there has to be something that's going to happen. So here he doesn't even know that God is proving him to show Satan that you're wrong, that he is an upright man, and that he fears and reverences me, right? And so here it is, Satan's trying to prove to God, because Satan is the accuser of the brethren, that yeah, he's only serving you because everything going right. That's why things are going the way it is. He's only doing this because you got everything going right. But when things happen and you begin to lose some things sometimes, and you know that you're doing everything that you possibly could do, and stuff still happens, you have to know that there's a possibility that your trial has been orchestrated, right? And when your trial has been orchestrated, right, that means God may be having a conversation with Satan to prove your worthiness and say that you are a faithful servant. And how you respond to the things that happen to you. I told my children this. I said, always pay attention to what happens to you, right? Pay attention to what happens inside of you when you go through different things. If it causes you to be bitter, right? Because all of us go through things, and there's only two results that come as a result of the trials that we go through. It either causes us to come out as pure gold, causes us to trust God even more, or it causes us to be discouraged and causes us to walk away God as if we never knew him, right? And so that's going to be something that you're going to have to determine. You're going to have to determine whether the things that you're going through, based on your walk with God, is the things that are happening in my life and around me, are the things that are taking place as a result of my disobedience, or is it a possibility that God is setting me up, right? That God is setting me up. In the end, and I'm not going to go through the whole story, but in the end, it shows that how it says that later on that Job had to pray for his sins, right? And Job had to pray for his friends, because his friends were trying to interpret what they think has happened to Job. And Job is going into depth, like, you know me, you know my character, you know that and for them to assume that he may have done something wrong in God's eyes, it was an insult to Job, right? And in the end, what happened was God wound up having Job pray for his friends, right? Because they were not, their perspective was off, right? And sometimes you can have people that are around you that are trying to perceive what's going on the inside of you and have no idea that God is orchestrating, because the Bible said the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, right? So there could be some things that God is allowing in your life to prove to Satan that you are faithful, to prove that you are a respectable and upright person, and that you're an honorable person. God could be having that same conversation about you to the enemy, to prove to the enemy that you are not just serving him because everything is going well. You're going, and also for you to see, right? That let me know that God had so much faith in Job. He knew Abraham was believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Abraham was asked to give up the very thing that God promised him. Abraham waited all of these years, right, to be able to have a son. And then yet here it is, God, the promises of God begin to manifest. And now you asking me to give up this thing. The hardest thing, I can't even imagine being able to pray for a child for so many years, and then here it is, it manifests, and now you ask me to give it back. Like, could you imagine what's going through their head? Like, what? And as he began to obey, right? As he began to obey what God was telling him, what happened, right? When he began to obey, then all of a sudden a ram in the bush began to come up at the same time. And God, the angel of the Lord told him to hold on. Wait a minute. Now I know, right? He told him, now I know. Hold on, my camera fell. He said, now I know that you fear me. Don't kill the boy. He told him, don't kill the boy. Now I know that there's nothing that you won't withhold from me. Now I know that you fear me. And he in the sacrifice was there. It showed up, right? It showed up. It was coming alongside of him as he began to obey God. And there is proof in the Bible that there have been many situations and circumstances, and these are just two, where there are some things that happen in your life as a result of God orchestrating it. And your job is to cultivate your relationship with God so that you can be able to know. And it doesn't mean that Job knew, because he did not know this was God. But what he did know is he trusted in God's integrity. He trusted that if God allowed this to happen, that there had to be a reason behind it. So we're going to take a quick break. I want you to call up your girlfriends and tell them Sisterhood Check-In is on the air. And then we're going to wrap up with some encouraging words after this.
Help me to trust him again with my heart and not be scared, looking over my shoulder when it comes to his actions because I felt betrayed by him. Help me to trust his good intentions towards me.
May not be physically with you.
They're in your church.
But I am sitting next to you.
Different face.
Different name.
Same story, though, that goes like this.
I've done some terrible things in my life.
Some of them I chose to do.
And I own these choices.
But others, I just feel like I was swept up in a series
of circumstances that didn't involve my will.
They just sort of happened to me.
I've become the culmination of those choices and circumstances.
So I guess I just need to say it.
I really,
Really.
Really need some help.
Hi, I'm Nadira, author, life and business coach, and founder of the Sisterhood Check-In podcast. I help women take their life experiences and turn them into life lessons. Book a call with me at bit.ly/coaching with Nadira. I look forward to helping you get to the other side of victory. Have a wonderful day. All right, and thank you for joining me back here on Sisterhood Check-In. We are talking today, or I'm talking today about a topic. Today's topic is your trials have been orchestrated. And in the first half, I talked about Job and how Job did not realize that God was having a conversation with Satan, right? Without him knowing, proving to Satan that he was that Job was an upright man, and that he was a man that hated evil, right? And that he feared the Lord, and that he had walked, he was a man of integrity. And so I started to go over the different things that were taking place and what was happening to Job, how he started to lose his children, he lost his land, he lost everything, right? He started to even lose his health. He started to have boils on his body, right? As a result of what was taking place, of this test. And he had no idea that God was allowing Satan, because God had told him, you can touch. He wanted to prove to Satan, because Satan was so gung-ho to feel like that, you know what, this Job was only serving you because things are going well for him. But here in the example, God is sharing with him, right, in orchestrating with him and letting him know that, look, you know, you can come, you can do whatever you want to him. Just don't take his body. Don't take it. Don't take his life, right? You don't have that authority to do that, right? Don't take his life. You could try him, you could test him, but don't take his life. And so now we're back and we're talking about how Job's friends, right, begin to share. And we're going to do several parts of this, because I did not want to rush this particular series. This is going to be like a 3 or 4 part series, and this is part 1 on your trials have been orchestrated. And so next week, I want you to come back and we're going to talk and we're going to get into depth about what Job's friends were saying and what God wants to show us through that. So make sure you join me again next Friday here on Sisterhood Check-In, and for part 2 of your trials have been orchestrated. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you were blessed and have an amazing, amazing weekend. You know, there's seasons in that our gifts operate and flow in. There's seasons. And if you miss your season or your moment, your gift may not be no longer useful. Because if he called a generation to ask a question or to need something in a specific season, and he birthed you for that season, you're useless if you don't operate in your season.
Listen, Nadira, listen. You're doing it again. You're doing it again. You know, you're doing it.